Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Investing Bros. It is Wednesday, January 11th, and we have got a great show lined up for you guys today. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin, the stock market, price action from a macro outlook, joined by a very special guest, our first guest on the Investing Bros channel, Caleb Franzen. Some of you guys already know him and you love him, so go ahead, if you have not already, smash the like for Caleb Franzen. If you are new, if you've never heard that name, you are in for a treat. Make sure you don't step away for a single second because this is going to be a great episode. I'm joined by T. Shroom this morning, my co-host. How are you doing this morning, T. Shroom?
Better than I deserve, Tim.
Oh, a good old classic.
Yeah, sticking with a classic. I do have a quote of the day for you here, and it comes by way of Warren Buffett. He said, and this must have been a little while ago, you'll see why I say that, no matter how great the talent or effort, some things just take time. You can't produce a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant. So
wow.
I don't know when he said that, but I don't know how well that would go over with today's media.
Did he trial and error that one? Did he test it out?
I doubt it. I think just in the day that he said that, which could have been the 70s. I mean, he's been famous for a long time.
That's true.
Famous investor, but it was probably well received by pregnant women all around the world.
Well received by pregnant women. Well, on that note, terrible segue, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm also joined by Caleb Franzen from the infamous Cube Room. Infamous is the wrong way because infamous is like evil, right?
No, it's good.
Is infamous good?
Yes.
It can be, yeah.
Okay, well then I'll stick with it.
Well, Caleb Franzen's infamous, so it's got to be good.
Cubic Room, which is amazing. Caleb, how are you doing this morning?
Guys, I'm doing well. I took someone to the airport this morning, so I was up bright and early, and I'm doing my best to get caffeinated and get juiced up. So I'm really happy to be here. Super excited for our discussion. And it's been great to see you guys, man. It's been a while, so been really excited to see your guys' channel and all the growth you've had and success so far. So excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, dude, I'm so excited. This is gonna be a great episode. I sent Caleb the list of questions. Hopefully we get through them all because I know between Tishu and myself and now Caleb, we could probably take each individual one of these subjects and create content for an entire hour on.
Yeah.
But we're gonna try to shift all of them into one bit. And so just to give you guys even kind of an idea of where we're going, I'm gonna throw it to Tishu here in just a second to give you guys some headlines that we will not be talking about necessarily in detail with Caleb. We'll probably talk more in depth down the road about them. But questions we're going to be talking with Caleb for today is the future of Bitcoin price action. Some of you guys have noticed it is still rising. I think it's coming down a little bit as we're speaking. Maybe it's hovering around 17,400. But where does that rally finally stop? Because I think a lot of people are in agreement that it's going to eventually stop and come back down. We'll move into his most excited alts that he's looking at. We're going to talk about gold and other metals because those are something that are traditionally more favorable during recessions. So speaking of recessions, we're also going to be talking about potentially where we could be going with an incoming recession. We're going to be talking about the stock market as a whole, but also some individual stocks that Caleb loves. And then the last one, this one's very interesting. If you've not heard about it, there's this new thing called ChatGPT, which is phenomenal. We'll talk more about that. But the big news coming out with them is that it's looking like Microsoft might be trying to acquire 49%. I want to get Caleb's take on that because just ChatGPT alone is a very interesting subject. But now when you get Microsoft getting involved, things could get pretty crazy over there.
Yeah.
T-Shroom, what are some other headlines we're going to be talking about today? What are some other headlines that happened this morning that maybe we won't be able to go into depth on?
I'm so glad that you asked, Tim. We are going to get into those right now. So Coinbase is looking like they're going to be closing the majority of their operations in Japan following global layoffs. So they're just going to go ahead and close shop over there. Obviously, a lot more details there, but we're going to go ahead and skip ahead, and we'll bring you those details in shows in the future later this week. Crypto.com delists Tether in Canada. That is a huge story, guys, because that has so many implications. Tether has been seen as kind of a sketchy coin for a long time by a lot of different people. Not everybody thinks that it's a sketchy coin, but now that it's being delisted in Canada, that could be the beginning of the end for USDT. And then the U.S. House of Representatives is voting on a bill to abolish the IRS and eliminating income tax. So nothing to see there, just normal day-to-day headline there. But I'll throw it back to you, Tim. Those are the things that we don't want you to miss out on in terms, like, as you know, we're reporting the news. So we would be remiss if we didn't mention those things.
Really quickly, and not too long, but Caleb, hearing any of those headlines, were there any of those headlines that you saw this morning that you have a strong take on you'd like to talk about before we move into the planned discussion?
Honestly, a lot of those were I'm hearing them for the first time.
Wow.
So, I've been on Twitter a little bit active this morning, but not enough to really be picking up little details and tidbits like that. So,
Yeah.
no major thoughts at the moment, but happy to field any questions.
Well, that's one of the advantages that T. Shum and I get because we have to work other jobs now and to make some money. We chose this slot 9 to 10 to go early to do it early in the day, and then we get to go to work. Well, we're one of the first big channels. I mean, we're not big. We're one of the first. We're one of the first channels that do a live show in the morning, so we get the advantage of being forced to wake up early to start the prepping process. But the one I'm going to say real quick, and we'll move on. The one that I thought was really crazy, and T-Shim and I were discussing a little beforehand, is the concept of the House. I knew they were going to try to repeal the 87,000 IRS new jobs that were made, but to full out abolish the IRS in general and take out income tax. That wouldn't necessarily affect us down in Florida too much because we already don't have income tax, but I would assume federally.
Well, it'd be federal, yeah.
That would be kind of crazy.
It would.
T-Shirt, what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I mean, they've got the printer, so they don't need tax revenue anymore, right?
That's true. Gosh.
That's my thoughts on it. But those poor IRS agents, my heart really goes out to those guys. If they were to lose their jobs, man, I would welcome them into my home. I've got a spare room. I mean, they've just done so much for this country, so much positive stuff. So
maybe they become diehard really investing bros.
Yeah.
They can become part of the channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're about to jump in here. We're going to start off with the first question. Normally, we go to chat and we read some of the names of the people in chat. To save time, I want to get into the meat, guys. We love each and every single one of you. We're not going to be able to read a lot of names. I do want to shout out Alex Green, though, because he was the first. So still want to shout out our first commenter of the day. If you guys want to have that honor, make sure you get here early. We usually are posting the stream at about 8:30ish. And so Alex got there nice and early. But let's go ahead and jump in. Go ahead and smash that like button. We got 57, almost 60 people watching. Only half of those are likes, though. Let's get those white mittens up. Let's start off with the topic of the title in the thumbnail. A macro outlook on Bitcoin. We're rallying this morning, so it's really nice and easy for people to feel bullish right now. But Caleb, I want you to be able to share your screen, go in depth. What are you seeing, not only on the short term for Bitcoin's price right now, but even macro, when we zoom out, what are your thoughts about what you're seeing right now?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Let's go ahead. Let me pull this up really quick. You guys should be seeing it now. I have just a date. Can you guys see this all right?
Yeah, it looks great.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So let's just start small and then we'll kind of go big, right? But even now, as we're looking at this chart, we're looking at 1 year of price data essentially. And going back to like the Q4 highs, that last little kind of rally that we had going to the top, consistent downtrend lower. So for me, I'm really focused and, even before we broke below this level, I was highlighting this key red range here because this was the low wick back in June of 2022. And then we continue to use this entire range as support on each retest, right? So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times at least. We come into that range, we bounce up. And so when we had the FTX news and we broke below it, I was getting really cautious as we got into this range. I did a post and I was telling people, I was like, please don't tell me you're FOMOing into this rally as we come into this red range because it's proven its former support, which means that it could act as potential resistance as we come back into that range. And so now here we are coming into it. I have a little bit of a wedge drawn here. I adjusted this last week. But I think right now, clearly this is holding up. So I want to keep watching this range. It's interesting to see a little bit of selling pressure this morning. It's basically insignificant. But once again, it's like we're coming into this range tomorrow morning, right? 8:30 a.m. We're going to be getting the CPI data, and we're pretty much aligned with where this red box is. And so tomorrow's inflation data is most likely going to be the catalyst that gets us to either push into this range and potentially get rejected or get an actual breakout. Obviously, bulls are hoping to see a breakout here, maybe to get into the $20,000 handle, because that means then that this entire red range now can act as support. In addition to, if that level fails, we now have this rising red trend line range. And so for me, I'm very focused on these dynamics in terms of the daily price action and what's kind of happening here. It's been nice to see some upward momentum because I think Bitcoin on like a rolling 30-day basis was trading at historically low levels of volatility. And so typically after getting historically low levels of volatility, we would expect to see that trend kind of reverse, right? So either a substantial move to the upside or the downside, which could either be sparked by some sort of fundamental catalyst or crypto specific type of news. And so as we kind of line up for the CPI data coming up tomorrow, I think that could probably be the catalyst.
Yeah, so I mean, realistically, do you see us getting during this stretch, this little rally you mentioned there with the bulls want going up towards 20,000? Do you see that as a realistic possibility, or are you predicting more than likely we bump our heads on that little zone? Because I love it. I have the exact same zone, former support turned resistance. Do you think we end up bumping our heads there and going back down to the downside, or do you think that bulls actually can mount a little bit more of a rally and push towards 20?
Again, it's all going to depend on the CPI data, but right, there's that classic saying in technical analysis: the more you retest the level, the weaker it gets, right? And so it continued to act as support, like I said, 7 times, and then on the 8th time it finally failed. We've only used this level as resistance, maybe once, maybe 2 times,
right?
And so as we come into it for the 3rd time, I don't necessarily know if that's enough for us to actually break out, but maybe if you kind of measure the totality of how much we've used this level as both support and resistance, this could essentially be the 11th retest. So in some capacity, right, I think you raise a good point, right? If we get much cooler than expected CPI, I think we're expecting 6.5 or 6.6 for median estimates. If we get in at that 6.5% level, maybe 6.4, that's going to be the catalyst to get us up and above this potential resistance range, and then once again flip it back into support.
Yeah, that makes sense. Love it.
Yeah. What we could do though, really quick, unless there was another question on that, is I'm happy.
I think Tishu had a question.
Yeah, a quick question for you. So a lot of folks are thinking kind of bearish, right? There's a recession looming, supposedly, and all of these things. So they're predicting lower. So Gareth Soloway is predicting all the way down to 9, but you're also seeing calls for 12 and 14.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to get a gauge of where do you think the lower bound is, and kind of why.
Sure. Let's go over that really quick. I think I'm definitely still bearish in this environment. I think on a I don't want to say like on a longer time scale basis, but you have to recognize if short-term momentum is increasing to the upside, there's always going to be counter trend rallies within a bear market. So quick, what I want to do is let's switch out to monthly candles here. And what I want to do, let's just use, we'll just zoom in on this range right here. This is going to be perfect. So what I want to do is, let's get rid of those lines I had on there. And in particular, I'm very focused, can I move this? There we go, perfect. I'm very focused on this range right here. And the reason why is because this goes back to the 2017 cycle peak, but we had that December monthly close. And I think that close there is very important. And so that basically lines us up with 13.8, 13.9 thousand. In addition, that level acted as perfect resistance in that 2019 retest at the highs. So again, we had kind of 2 peaks right on that level. And in addition to that, I'm going to be focused, I think it was on the month of June there in 2019, that monthly close. So that gives us 10.7, 10.8K. And so for me, that's really kind of been my magnet. I first shared this analysis in June or July of 2022, and we've just kind of continued to trend lower towards that range. So for me, I've continued to reiterate that, for me, this is a general magnet that I think price is going to be attracted to. It certainly doesn't, it's not guaranteed that we're going to get down there. But I think as we think about general price structure, that's probably one of the more important dynamics to watch. The second one would be this deeper range, which we're currently in, which would line us up with the wicks on those 2017 and 2019 highs. So you could make the case that we're already in a support range. We are. But again, we haven't seen what would indicate to be an upside momentum reversal, right? So we haven't used this level as support really, right? We came in here in June of 2022 and we just kind of stagnated sideways. The FTX news happened and we've only moved deeper into this range. So from my perspective, right, you have those downside calls. I don't necessarily know if we'll get down below 10K. I'd actually be quite surprised if we did, though I'm certainly open to the possibility. But I think when you have guys like Gareth, who's a great technician and analyst, but at the same time, I really view this, I think it was 10.8K to 13.9K is really kind of my concrete kind of support range from a price structure perspective.
I like it. Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat. I've said to people, mine is somewhere between that 13.8. I like that one up to, I think 14.3 has a lot of weight to it as well. So right in that zone, still definitely very possible to go even lower. Another question, and this is staying on Bitcoin, but I know, in the past, Caleb, you and I have gone back and forth on this, the correlation between Bitcoin and the Dixie. What are you seeing on the Dixie? We've seen it dipping over the last couple of days, but even from a macro outlook, do you think that will play a major factor in where Bitcoin goes next? Or do you think that they'll start moving together? What are your thoughts about what you're seeing on that chart?
Sure. So I think this is an important clarification to make, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, well, the Dixie's down, which is causing stocks to go up or crypto to go up. It's not a causal relationship. It's just a correlation, right? So I love how you clarified that there, because the same causal factor is causing the Dixie to fall and stocks and risk assets to go up. Yeah. So they happen simultaneously, not, oh, this happened to the dollar, so now stocks are going to do this.
Right.
Right. So I think that's a very important clarification. What I'd like to show here, I'll share my screen once again here, pulling up the Dixie. This is a level that I've been highlighting and sharing with people just on Twitter. But what I want to do, let's just focus, right? We had this trend line breakdown that I highlighted in real time. We had multiple kind of trend line breakdowns. You had people sharing parabolic levels, curves, trend lines. I don't like those. I just want to rely on linear trend lines here. But we had that breakdown, and I basically shared that I thought we were going to get down to this kind of target range. This first acted as resistance, flipped it into support. Mm-hmm. We had confluence there with this rising trend line. And now what happened, we tried to use it as support, resistance, resistance, resistance. So this is very important. The one thing I'd like to add onto this chart actually is, let's pull up, actually I have a pre-saved study here.
Nice. Making use of those features.
There we go.
Exactly. So this is a 200-day moving average cloud. And so in blue or teal, we're looking at the 200-day EMA. In yellow, we're looking at the simple moving average. And so, there's a lot of debate about which moving average you should use. I say, why not use both?
Nice.
And use that kind of entire range or a cloud as a dynamic support or resistance range. And so you could see, we really did kind of line up here with this 200-day moving average cloud. We flipped it from resistance into support 3 times. We came into it here. We really tried to use that as a rebound level. It worked, and it lined up perfectly with this structural base that we were just talking about. And now what's happened, we had a perfect retest at the end of last week and a massive sell-off now since then, right? So we have really great confluence here with an actual structural level and a rejection on the 200-day moving average cloud. So from my perspective, what this means, we've already made lower lows now within this trend here. And so for me, that's a clear kind of signal that now the trend concretely is starting to reverse, right? That could certainly change, but now we really have proof positive that the downtrend is in place. So what I'm looking at now for investors is, I think at least in the short term, we should have a downside or bearish bias on the dollar, which means potentially an upside or bullish bias for risk assets, so long as, and this is key, so long as the dollar remains below the 200-day moving average cloud and below this structural resistance level. Yeah. If we flip above those ranges, I think you need to cut long-term long positions, bullish trades, and shift to a more defensive stance. But so long as we're making lower highs and lower lows below the 200-day moving average cloud, I think that the dollar likely is going to consolidate sideways or to the downside in this market.
Yeah, that's really insightful. We had a question from Alex Green. He said, Caleb, I see you use shapes and horizontal support and resistance as I do, as well as market psychology. He was curious, do you use MACD or RSI as well?
I actually don't. And the reason for that is, I think, I'll check in on it every now and then. I don't look at the MACD really. Occasionally I'll look at RSI just to get some, maybe some bullish divergences, bearish divergences. I think that's just something useful to have in the back pocket. But I think for me, one thing that I learned early on in my study of TA, maybe starting 8 years ago, was, everyone is looking at RSI and MACD. Mm-hmm. So what's the edge there, right? I mean, trading and investing, a lot of it is all about edge. And if you're using the same thing that everyone else is using, you have no edge. And so, again, it's potentially an important metric. They're going to be reliable in some circumstances, not in others. No indicator is perfect. I'm very well aware of that. Even price structure analysis isn't perfect. But for me, I found some other different indicators and oscillators and methods that I generally like to use for my style. But other people use RSI and MACD with a lot of success. So if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Heck yeah!
Again, that's a great point right there. Out of curiosity, what are the oscillators that you like to use? Like you said, to give you an edge. What do you find has been really helpful to you?
My favorite is called the Williams %R oscillator. So if we use an example of a 30-day Williams %R oscillator, what it does is it calculates the trailing 30-day high and low, and it plots where price is relative to that range, right? So you get a percentage of the current price relative to the high and low of the prior 30 days. And so I love that indicator because in a bull market, in a rising uptrending market, whenever we actually get to an overbought reading in that indicator, it typically indicates some sort of momentum thrust. And so oddly enough, even though something can become overbought, it can stay overbought for much longer. And so in a rising uptrend, when you get those overbought indicators, it's usually a very good sign that a momentum thrust is coming. Conversely, if you get an oversold reading within an uptrend, it kind of highlights to me some sense of value, right? So we're trading at a discount relative to the prior 30-day trend. And you're essentially speculating or betting that trend is going to stay intact. And so if something is oversold relative to the trend, but the trend isn't going away, you'd expect to see that trend continue. So you want to take advantage of those oversold readings.
Dude, that's awesome. I told you guys in the beginning, we could probably go the entire hour just continuing down this train of thought. But let's change up just a little bit. We're going to stay in the world of crypto before we move into the stock market. Caleb, so we just talked about Bitcoin for about 15, 20 minutes here. What are your thoughts about altcoins? What are some altcoins that you're excited about? And do you have any thoughts you want to go deeper into on those?
Yeah, let's do it. First, though, I want to share one last Bitcoin chart that I think is really worthwhile, because you guys did ask me to talk about kind of the longer term view and the bigger picture. And so I definitely want to do that with this final chart here.
Awesome.
So what we're looking at is the price of Bitcoin using weekly candles on Coinbase exchange. So this is just Bitcoin US dollar. We're not using Tether or anything like that. And what I've done here is I've tagged two anchored volume weighted average price measurements here from the lows. And a lot of traders will use this as a critical support range because they're essentially like a moving average, but anchored or pivoted to a specific level. And so over time, these can provide really interesting and useful indicators, especially when pivoted from the high or the low of a given cycle. If you anchor it to the top or a peak, it can act as resistance. So I'd actually be kind of curious now that we're all here. Let me take this anchored VWAP, tag it to this high, and then let me try this really quick. We need to change the input to the high of the cycle, not the low. Okay, so it didn't necessarily work here in this particular case, right? But getting back above this range was somewhat of a bullish signal for the long run momentum of Bitcoin getting above the anchored VWAP from the prior high. We certainly had lows that came thereafter. But once again, within an uptrending market over the long run, pivoting from the lows can be really good as support. And we've seen that play out actually perfectly, right? So we came into those 2018-19 lows. We dipped a little bit below it. You could even see it acted as resistance there briefly. But as soon as we got back above it, that was a green light for the uptrend to continue. We came back into it during 2020, dipped below it briefly, but never closed below it. Uptrend continues. Where are we right now? We're coming right back into that range, and we're already starting to rebound on it since those November lows. So for me, this is important simply because if we get below this range, as we have in the past, that would really be a sign for me to pause, to really reconsider DCAing. And once we get back above it, that's kind of my line in the sand. All right, resume DCA purchases now that we kind of have the green light in terms of the anchored VWAP.
Wow.
Interesting.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's jump into the altcoins. So what altcoins are you excited about right now? You don't have to go into like a full list of your portfolio, but let's do your top three. Top three altcoins you're excited about. And what we'll go ahead and say is you cannot say Ethereum and you cannot say Cardano. We talk about those every single day. Do you have other coins that you're excited about? If those are the only two you're excited about, we'll go into those ones. But if you have others that you also like, let's cover some of the other ones.
Yeah.
No, I have others, and fundamentally, I don't really read too much into the tech on these, and so I generally have an understanding of kind of what they are as a layer one, or some of the fundamental catalysts that they have going on. But I don't necessarily know if these really have too much of a long-term thesis, right? And so for me, I really want to approach this from a trading perspective, from a technical analysis perspective. What is price telling us? Because once again, markets are forward-looking pricing mechanisms. And so they're going to bake in all fundamental catalysts, all known news and information about any given asset, and price is going to boil that down. So price, in my perspective, is the most pure indicator that anyone can have because it's discounting all future known events and the potential for unknown events, right? And so one of them that I'm really looking at right now as a potential trade is Atom, right? So we're looking at the Cosmos ecosystem here. And the reason why I'm going to highlight these names in particular is because I think within the current market structure, looking at where certain altcoins can go based on former resistance, I think Atom and these other two that I'm going to share shortly after carry the most upside towards that resistance level. And so as we look at Atom right now, I drew a Fibonacci here from the low of June 2022 to the peak here in September of 2022. And we can see we're bouncing right on that golden pocket of the 61.8. We came right into that level and we've just been accelerating since then, right? I don't even know how much this has gained over that period of time. It's up right now 31%, right? Wow. Which is a big gain there since mid-December, right? So it hasn't even been a month. This thing is up 30%. And from my perspective, right, in that particular example, then I want to know, well, where can this go? Where's the next potential resistance level from a structural perspective? And so I kind of saw this key range right here. You could argue maybe that this acted as support. Clearly, it didn't last because we sliced right through it. But again, the market seems to have price memory here because it acted as resistance twice. And then again, for a third time, as we made that downward extension to the 61.8 Fibonacci. And so for me, I see this entire range here as a potential target for where price can go, which gives us upside of about 43% to 55% to the upside. So that's a nice little trade. The issue here is, your risk management at this point is pretty loose, right? So I'd put a stop beneath this 61.8% fib, which basically gives you about a 25% downside. So a 25% downside to capture a 42% upside to a 54% upside is maybe a 2-to-1 risk reward. That for me doesn't get me super excited, but so I think it's going to be up to a lot of people here to figure out what their risk reward is. Potentially you might say, it's got a black line on here. You can't even see it. Let's use this white line here. That right there might be your cutoff point, right? So it acted as support here, resistance. We broke above it. So maybe this now is your cutoff point, which gives you a 6.5% stop loss. That's much more attractive. So again, it's going to be up to each individual trader here to figure out how they want to play this. But I think Atom, at least from a structural perspective, might be setting up in a pretty nice way.
No, I actually really like that. Because even looking at, I was looking at my screen, I'm not going to pull it up because I want to go back to Caleb here very quickly. But that zone you had drawn, I believe it's somewhere in the higher $15 up to $17. Not only what you were showing right there, where it kind of bumped. Actually, share your screen again, and I'll kind of show, make sure I'm
sure.
Looking at that price where you said it kind of hesitated right there, that box. If you were to extend that out to the left, it goes back into like early 2021 being major support back then. As you guys, so way over there to the left. So I love that zone you have drawn. It's been support, it's been resistance, it's been support, it's been resistance. There clearly is something very magnetic about that zone between $16 and $17. So that's a great call that you have right there.
And I know I really appreciate kind of the disclaimer of the lack of technology knowledge that you have for these, for altcoins. Sure. I can attest that Atom is doing something pretty innovative in the interoperable space there for bridges from to and from different blockchains. So
it's the IBC, right?
That's right. Yeah. So as far as the technology, it's not like the best in the world, but it's definitely in the contender for the top 3, top 4 type of coin. So really, really good stuff there.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? And I was invested in this in 2022. in 2021 and 2022, and I've sold it off since, so I don't own it anymore. But this is an interesting setup for sure. The next one I'd love to go over. Everyone knows this coin, so no secret here. But we're looking at Polygon and Matic.
Nice.
And so again, for me, right, I want to try to identify what potential upside could still be in store. Where are kind of the magnets for price? And so we could really identify kind of 2 or 3 main structural levels here. So the first is this alternating support into resistance range. That's just crystal clear price structure, right? So, I mean, for me, this is just glaringly obvious. This was the first half of the year support range. We sliced right through it, had that massive deep drawdown. We come right back into that range. What happens? We get rejected, right? This doesn't get much clearer than that. And so then, we're also in this, potential resistance flipped into support range. I've strengthened that here with this rising trend line. Again, just trying to outline key levels of structure, not necessarily knowing if they're going to continue to work. But as we look at Matic here, right, if we think about potential upside getting back into this magnetic zone, it's kind of how I view it. Again, that's a 56% upside just to get into the middle of that range there. And so I think the risk reward here is a little bit more attractive than something like Atom, because our downside is 15%. So if you're risking 15% to make 55, that's a much more, that's over a 3-to-1 risk reward ratio on that. And so for me, that's where I start to get interested, thinking about price structure analysis and a potential trade here. So I certainly have my eyes on Polygon. The closer we get back down to this green range, the more attractive that risk reward becomes.
That's right.
Right. So in a lot of ways, I'm hoping we get another pullback here down to like the 81 cent, 80 cent range, because that's where my ears would start to perk up. Right now we're trading at 85.5 cents. So for me, that's another one that I really have on my radar right now. Fundamentally, I think Polygon has probably been one of the biggest winners during this bear market. All the different partnerships that they've had with Starbucks. I think they did something with Nike or Adidas, Disney. So from a fundamental standpoint, they're building really key and critical relationships with massive top companies in the United States. So that kind of convergence between the traditional economy versus the crypto economy seems to be coming together on the Polygon ecosystem.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great assessment, and I couldn't agree more.
That's awesome. Well, did you have a third one that you liked as well?
I did, and this one is probably the riskiest. Let me pull this up.
Dogecoin.
Yeah, for all my degens out there. No, it's going to be Solana.
Oh wow!
Oh man, it's very controversial.
Okay, so once again, I want to try to find key potential resistance areas, and I think we have one here with Solana. Again, we come into this mid 2022 lows, that deep wick. This was, what was the extent of this drawdown here from the highs to just that level, right? This was a 90% drawdown just to get down to that low wick from the highs. So that was a severe drawdown correction. That's way deeper than a correction, right? And so we come back into that range. We continue to use it as support another time, and right through here, right? And these little rallies, they don't look like much because of what we know now. But this is a 30% swing just in that little pocket right there. This swing right here was a 45% gain. These are massive moves, right? And so as we think about where Solana is right now relative to that key structure, I think we're trading at a pretty interesting level. If we got back into that range, it's basically a 93% upside, so a double. The problem is, if we get back down to those lows, that's a 50% drawdown, right? So again, how do we think about structure here? How do we think about risk management? I think for me, we could potentially outline another key level here. Here it is. So maybe this is going to be somewhat of a support range if we really do kind of get back into this level here, right? Former resistance could act, it even acted as resistance right here, could act as support if we get down into this zone. Then you might start to think about risk reward being a little bit more attractive, getting up to 113%, potentially an 81% gain. And then again, it's all about controlling risk here, right? So for me, maybe you get down to that low wick into this range right here. I know it didn't act as support in these two other retests, but again, I'm going to be really focused on the wicks here and just the general structure. And so for me, if I'm risking taking a trade in this zone, a 16% loss, 15% loss, once again, to capture a 100% gain, to me, from a risk reward perspective, that's all trading comes down to. That's potentially attractive from my perspective.
And I think it's really interesting. I'll mention, because we're not the biggest Solana supporters here necessarily, but I love that you just broke it down, because you're just looking at the chart like that. That's taking emotions out of it. We're just looking at a chart. We're looking at possibilities here. And I think here's what I'll say. Me not being a Solana supporter, I actually think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, especially because that big dip down was heavily correlated to FTX. And of course, Sam Bankman-Fried was one of Solana's biggest supporters. And so there's been a lot of FUD in the market. And remember, we tell people all the time, FUD doesn't mean it's wrong. FUD just means fear, uncertainty, and doubt. A lot of FUD came in the market. Now, some of it realistic, because we had that massive drop in developers. Solana is down 97% of its developers. So from a fundamental standpoint, can they regain some of those building blocks? But Caleb's absolutely right. It's sitting in a massively oversold territory that as you were saying, you could almost have an 100% increase, and that's nothing at this point. That tells you how far Solana's fallen. But it's still got a lot of supporters, and the charts are looking very good. So that's risky, you're right, but I think, there's some people are going to take that risk, and they might actually, get a good payout from it.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment wholeheartedly, right? I mean, this thing just tanked. It was like a boulder in the water, right? Just absolutely plummeting. And like out of nowhere, already it's gained 93%. From those lows. And so clearly this has gone on somewhat of an irrational bounce here. And so figuring out exactly how someone wants to play this is going to be up to them. But again, right, I think if the overall crypto ecosystem and risk assets perform well, especially going into the CPI and post CPI data, I think that again, you just want to try to find what offers the most potential upside here. Where can I manage and control risk? And what are key resistance levels that, I would be a seller in if I own this asset? And, as I look at Solana, clearly the news around it is absolutely terrible. I wouldn't have a lot of trust and faith in the ecosystem. But, right, I mean, how much of that is because of all the fear around FTX, the Sam Bankman-Fried stuff, this, that, and the other? And hey, maybe the fundamentals are a little bit detached from price, right? I know you guys have interviewed Mark Yusko before, and he always talks about price can be a liar. Maybe the price of Solana is lying right now, and this is severely undervalued. I don't necessarily think so, but that also doesn't mean that it can't go on another extensive pump, right? Like I said, it's already up 94% off the lows.
Yeah, I agree.
It's incredible.
Well, let's transition here. We've been talking about crypto. Anyone who just joined, thank you so much for joining. We got Caleb Franzen here, phenomenal guest, the first guest ever on the channel. So I'm so excited to have him here. Make sure to go ahead and smash that like button if you've been loving it. We talked Bitcoin, we talked altcoins. I'm not even going to tell you all the things we said, so you got to go back. If you just joined, when the show's over, go back and watch it. It's all been great stuff. Let's move over and transition into more traditional stocks. Let's start off with metals. Gold has been on a tear recently. The charts from what I was seeing look like it's a little overbought at the moment, but I'm interested. What are your thoughts about gold, silver, other metals that you're seeing right now?
Okay, so fundamentally, I have a really hard time getting bullish on gold. Maybe that's just because I'm a millennial. I think it's really been the most, and look, this is coming from a former gold bug. So trust me, if anyone understands the fundamental thesis and the investment thesis behind gold, trust me, it's me. Peter Schiff is one of the people who's probably most responsible for my knowledge and education on macro and market conditions. So I get the gold thesis. Trust me. Yeah, awesome. I mean, the guy spits facts on macro, but in terms of investment advice, I wouldn't listen to what he's saying so much. Either way, this gold rally, at least from my perspective, has been a little bit nonsensical, but at the same time, after kind of scratching my head and thinking about the dynamics that are taking place, it kind of makes sense, right? Because we need to think about this context. Gold has an inverse correlation with real interest rates, right? And so as we think about the market environment over the course of the past several months in a lot of different ways, we've seen inflation cool down severely, inflation expectations cool down severely, and yields now are starting to fall as well. And so with yields falling and inflation falling, both of those have a net impact of reducing real interest rates. And so as real interest rates fall, gold is going to rise. So that's exactly what we see playing out now since September and October of 2022. And so off of those lows, this is actually pretty interesting. Off of the I'm looking at it here, November 3rd lows, gold has gained about 16.33%. That's a massive rally for gold, and it hasn't really had much of a drawdown during that period. In mid-November, gold fell about 4%. And aside from that, it's just been, climbing the ladder higher. And so I think from my perspective, it's certainly overbought and extended right now. But as I mentioned earlier, just because something is overbought and extended doesn't mean it's going to reverse course. And so this kind of momentum in price action could certainly be sustained. But if I wanted to get involved in gold, which I don't, I'd be looking for a little bit of a pullback to start building out a position and take it from there.
So what are your thoughts then on that video that kind of went a little viral where Mark Cuban called, what's his name?
Bill Maher.
Bill Maher, dumb as F for investing in gold. Do you agree with Mark Cuban? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, look, gold maybe has a place in portfolios, but I would generally say no more than 5%. I would always avoid gold mining ETFs, silver mining ETFs. If you want to expand beyond gold and get into precious metals, I would have no more of my portfolio exposure than 5% to precious metals. And so from there, take it however you want. You could do 3% gold, 1% silver, and 1% palladium or platinum, right? Take your pick here on the industrial metals. But from my perspective, that 5%, what is it really doing? If gold goes up 100% and you only have a 5% exposure in your portfolio, how much is it really saving you, right? So I just don't view it as an effective or efficient allocation of capital. And when interest rates right now are 4.3%, to me, that means capital is very scarce. So I need to be very selective about the investment opportunities that I'm taking in a high interest rate environment when I have a risk-free rate of return. Last week, guys, I went into my Schwab account and I put in, how much did I put in? Like 4 figures into a money market fund at 4.3%.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for the 4.3%. I could sell this at any time. It's super liquid, but I'm generating a 4.3% annual yield on this investment. So whether I hold it for 30 days or 2 years, hey, thank you so much. And so, I'm going to take advantage of that right now. And so for me, I don't view gold as being an attractive investment. Maybe it has a little bit more upside in terms of a pop. I don't know. And so for me, I'm just going to avoid it personally.
That makes sense. Well, let's transition then into stocks. We got about 20 minutes left for the show, so we got a lot still left to cover. What are you seeing on some of the more common ones, SPY, SP 500, NASDAQ? What are you seeing on the macro level for the stock market as a whole right now? Let's dive into some of those charts.
Yeah, let's do it. Let me share my screen here. Okay, so we're just looking at the S&P 500. Again, I'm going to be really focused on just some key levels of price structure. Market's doing really well this morning, guys. S&P's up 0.63% right now. That's great.
If I could just pause you there, it's likely because of the story that we'll hopefully get to at the end. If you look at Microsoft and Amazon's charts right now, they are just skyrocketing like a New Year's firework. And nice. So let's go ahead and dive into the S&P.
Yeah.
That's epic. Let me check one thing here really quick. This is the New York NYSE FANG Plus Index. So this is an equal weight basket of 10 mega cap tech stocks. This is having a nice little breakout right now, up 0.85% on the day. It's leading the S&P. But let's go ahead and pull up the S&P 500 here. Like we just said, up 0.63% on the day. Really solid price action. One thing, on a short-term basis, we're coming into this resistance level. If we zoom in here and look at something like, let's just pull 1 hour candles. I had this level going into it. We came right in. We tried to get above it, but we couldn't. We failed back in and we broke down. We're coming right into that zone now, right? So for me, I'm going to be curious to see if we can get above it. What I'm going to do right now live is set an alert above that high wick.
Nice.
From, I think it was from 2 days ago. Monday's session, right there in the morning. So if we get above that, I'll get a notification. I'll let you guys know. But really quick now, let's go ahead and pull back and look at some of the daily candle dynamics. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete this channel range here, just for the sake of this conversation. And I really want to highlight the key structure on this chart, right? The only thing that matters, in my opinion, is this green channel. It has been perfect resistance the entire way down, the whole way, right? And so I modified this resistance channel as we came in and we had that almost false breakout. I think that was on the last CPI day, if I remember correct. and we sold off throughout that entire session, right? So for me, we're coming in, we're trying to rise up. Again, I have this 200-day moving average cloud on here. We can generally see that, sorry guys. We could generally see that weird things have been happening kind of in this range, very choppy behavior. And basically during the downtrend, as soon as these SMA and EMA started having a downward slope, which both of them occurred really like around here, I would say, we really started to get a downward slope there on the simple moving average. We've really seen this range act as dynamic resistance. We came into it here, rejected. We came into it again, rejected. Couldn't close above it. And so now we're coming right back into that spot. This is potential resistance. At the same time, I did a funny tweet. This was probably in August or something like that when everyone was getting really bulled up. I was like, was it just a bull flag all along, right? We have our massive pole here. We have our flag structure, clear channel. What if we get a breakout? Hey, that could, right? It could be a bull flag. But we have a lot of hurdles to get through before we get there. So I'm not overly optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic. So that's the S&P. Let's do one other thing here. And let's look at the NASDAQ. I think the NASDAQ is going to be a little bit more of our arbiter of truth because that's really showed the most amount of weakness. So if we see that weakness turn into strength in tech stocks, that's going to be a really good sign from a fundamental basis. Some of the things that I was very concerned about from my perspective was the fact that we got below these June lows. And for me, that was kind of the line in the sand. And so I shared this on Twitter earlier in the week. I said, for me to flip short-term bullish, what I need to see is price get above those June lows, which we did briefly during Friday's session. We closed above it. On Monday, we got above it. And then I also wanted to see us get back within the bull flag. We did during yesterday's close. That was very important for me. And today we're seeing the continuation dynamic. That's very different than what we saw on Monday's session, where we had a massive pop into this range and we couldn't secure it. So we stayed above those June lows, which I thought was a beneficial sign, but we were below the bear flag. Now we're back into the bear flag. So it's very possible this bear flag dynamic that I was sharing is now invalidated. And that's okay, right? I'm willing to be wrong in my price structure and predictions so long as the setup gets invalidated. I know what my invalidation criteria are, and now we're starting to see those invalidation criteria, the boxes are getting checked. So potentially here, momentum is shifting. The final thing I'll say on the NASDAQ here, this 200-day moving average cloud has been very good dynamic resistance. For the S&P 500, it was very choppy. For the NASDAQ, it's been almost perfect, right? Look at all these resistance levels here, guys. Perfect resistance in all 3 times we really come into that range. In the December retest, we couldn't get quite there, but we got rejected on the we got rejected there on the channel structure. And so for me, that's why we want to have multiple levels of confluence. We want to be tracking multiple things here. So this channel range is going to be very important for me. If we happen to break above it, great, that's totally fine. But then we need to be cautious of the 200-day moving average cloud.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's good.
Did you have a follow-up question on that one, T-Shirt?
Well, I'm just thinking of the fundamentals because it does look like there's bullishness. Or, especially this morning, you're seeing big names in the NASDAQ and the S&P getting bought, but a lot of that is on a story that we'll hopefully get to in a second. And I think it's kind of a flash in the pan story, although there is definitely some big upside potential for Microsoft adding revenue in the future with basically an M&A. Deal that we'll get to here in a second. Well, I think the overall prevailing winds are still very bearish. I still hear most analysts kind of saying recession, and if not like a definitional recession, recessionary forces, especially if we start to see unemployment tick up. But more and more, I think just that the market is really at a decision point. We don't really know what to do. And if you didn't pull it up, but if you pulled up the Dow Jones, it's already up above that support. That upward downward trending channel of support there. So it's interesting. I do think that the market is at a big decision point because I'm hearing very smart analysts on both sides.
I was going to say I am a fan of the spontaneous. Let's actually do that. Let's pause and let's go into that story because we're talking about the stock market. We're talking about those things. What is this big story, T-Shroom, that potentially is causing not only the SP 500 and NASDAQ to rally, but also is huge in terms of it should affect everyone's lives here very soon.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you what that story is right now. So that story is Microsoft is in talks to acquire a 49% stake in ChatGPT and to become the owner, essentially. Not a majority stake owner, but when Microsoft comes into town and starts buying up your company, they're going to start making some calls. Let's get into the details here.
I would say I see Eric Wallace. He's been saying it over and over again. Let's get into before we move forward. I don't know if that's what you're about to do. So if I'm interrupting you, I'm very, very apologetic, although I'm not.
No, you're good.
What is ChatGPT for people out there who have no idea what this is?
Yeah.
Can you give us a quick rundown of what it is?
I mean, I can just show you live on screen. Let's take a look at what ChatGPT is. And Caleb, bear with us for a second, but this is an important demonstration. As you can see, the markets are reacting in real time. So if I ask ChatGPT a question or something more complex, but if I say, tell me a story about Jerome Powell and Oprah.
I'm actually very curious as to what this comes up. OPRAH, I think.
Yep.
Falling in love.
Wow.
In Florida.
This is about to get good.
Let's see what it does. So.
Oh no.
That is a fictitious scenario with no basis in reality.
But I've seen it before. Make up stories.
Yeah, well,
that's pretty funny.
Let's see.
Maybe say make up a story about Jerome Powell.
Yes,
that was gonna be a really good example. Oh my god!
It's not wanting to do it. That's funny. Well, okay, but essentially what you're seeing is it has its limitations, but it can create scripts. It can create anything that you would want it to do. Oh, okay. So now it's making it. So it gave a little disclaimer. Yeah. But if I read this live, probably won't get all through it. But once upon a time, Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, was much needed vacation in Florida. He had been working tirelessly and steadily the economics and needed a break from the stress of his job. On the beach, he met Oprah Winfrey, who was also enjoying a vacation in the Sunshine State. At first, they were just two strangers enjoying the warm weather, and I'll jump ahead. In the end, Jerome and Oprah lived happily ever after, and their love story became the stuff of legend. So as you can see here, guys, it just does what you ask it to do. It does have limitations, but that was just fun. Think about the impact on certain industries, journalistic. The industry is certainly going to be impacted here.
College students getting this to write their essays for them so they don't have to stay
that's
up
right.
till 3 a.m.
There's been reports of kids in high school and college using this to write their own essays.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of implications. But the overall story here is that Microsoft wants a bid, they want a piece of it to compete with Google. Because, guys, I'll tell you what, I've been using ChatGPT, and it is better than Google in some scenarios. Mm-hmm. Not every scenario. And one thing to know about ChatGPT is it only can go fetch data and provide responses based on information up through 2021, the free version at least. So, Caleb, not really a question there, but what is your thoughts on Microsoft acquiring ChatGPT? What would the implications of that be? And what are just your opinions on it? Have you used it? Are you a fan? Do you think it's going to be the end of humanity?
I am super optimistic and bullish on ChatGPT and using artificial intelligence and this kind of query and language processing in the future. I think it's going to change a lot of things. I think it's already changing a lot of things, and we're still, really in the early stages in terms of consumer use. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this kind of continues to open up new paths and avenues going forward. For transparency, I'll say, I've had ChatGPT edit my newsletters. I've had ChatGPT write portions of my newsletters. Mm-hmm. It's a skill to use this platform because I have a specific view and understanding of economics that ChatGPT isn't going to buy into unless I kind of force it into a certain path, right? And so you can query certain responses very specifically that are going to give you a certain type of answer. Sometimes it makes mistakes. So I think it's really important to make sure that all the things that are being said are actually true. And you can actually correct it and tell it to modify a response based on its new understanding. So that's really interesting for me. Tying this into Microsoft. So the main company who's doing ChatGPT is called OpenAI. And as far as I know, Microsoft invested $1 billion into OpenAI back in 2019. And so I think the fact that they've now had kind of this viral product in a lot of ways, and people are really understanding the potential use cases and really kind of having this wide-eyed approach about what the future could be with this platform. I'm not surprised to see Microsoft, a massive tech conglomerate and company, look to expand their service suite, right? And so I think one of the things that I read is that, as far as I know, Microsoft owns Bing or something like this.
Yes.
And so what they're hoping to do is to integrate some form of ChatGPT into Bing, essentially to compete with Google Chrome, with Brave, with Safari, whatever the case is. And so that'll be a very interesting development, because I tried to use Bing years back and I just thought it was a terrible platform. I use Brave browser right now just because I like the built-in ad blocker, essentially. And occasionally I'll flip back to Chrome just for one reason or the other. But if for example, if Bing is the only place to access ChatGPT, I'm probably using it up to a dozen times per week, like individual cases, and I'll query a bunch of different things. And so, hey, that'll be really useful for me. So if Microsoft is looking to take market share in terms of browser activity, this would certainly be the way to do it, and it might be worth $10 billion. So it's certainly an interesting development.
I think something interesting, because I've had some conversations over this last week with some people about it. And of course, some people's immediate response is, wow, this is cheating. This is terrible. Like, I talked with a couple educators, so they were teachers, and they were like, this is going to kill creativity. This is going to, students aren't going to learn. And I was like, you know what? I bet you when the calculator first started coming out, math teachers said the exact same thing. If used correctly, this has the potential to be the calculator of English, of creativity when it comes to writing and stuff. And it's not about, hey, can you do all this writing from scratch? It's, do you know how to program and ask the right questions to get the right responses, to go in and edit? I think this is like the next evolution of education and teaching kids how to build and create better and greater things, same way as a calculator. Listen, you can sit there and do the math. You can sit there and do this basic stuff. But if you can have a shortcut so you can get better things produced, that's better for not only our world, but even the education of these students. But if done wrong, if we don't teach kids this way, it could just be a crutch. Yeah. But I think if handled the right way, and I think we will get there, this is going to be considered, it's the calculator of writing.
Yeah. I would say if this scares you and shocks you, and it certainly scared and shocked me at first, just the technology, the fact that it's free and what it's capable of. If it scares and shocks you, strap in, folks. There's been a university in California that has predicted this thing called the singularity that they've calculated this for 20 years, that the singularity would hit in 2025. So this is just an initial breadcrumb of what is to come. This is just a single ripple in the water that could ultimately turn to a hurricane of how our lives are going to get flipped upside down. Now, it could go bad, but it also could go well. This university and a lot of futurist theorists think that all the prices of all goods and services could eventually go to close to zero because of AI and robotic intervention in our economies. So it could go really bad. It could also go really, really well. I'm of the nature, and it sounds like Caleb is too, I want to be a part of it rather than getting left behind by it. And I don't think that that's an unethical stance to take at this point. So that's because Microsoft is the sole beacon of morality and ethics in my mind. So anyway, we'll probably wrap it out here as we're getting toward the end.
Yeah, we have a couple minutes here. What I wanted to make sure we got to, Caleb, we have links down below. People can go follow you on Twitter, but you also have you mentioned it earlier, a really amazing newsletter. Can you tell our audience just a little more about that newsletter? I know I was looking at it this morning. There's a free option. There is there's one you can pay for a whole year. There's one you pay for a month. What could people expect if they were to sign up for your newsletter on these different levels? And why should they click that link and sign up today?
Guys, just go sign up for the free newsletter. You'll receive weekly updates from me personally. It's all exclusive, original analysis based on all the time I'm spending in front of my charts every week. And so in each newsletter, I break down the most important things that I think you should be aware of in the macro economy, the stock market, and Bitcoin. So if you're interested in one of those things or all three, there's always going to be something for you in these newsletters. They're free every week, delivered Saturday mornings. So that's really kind of my main source for long form content and research. I spent 2 years in banking, almost 2+ years in banking, more than a year plus in wealth management. So, I'm an industry professional and really kind of started my own business, if you will, sharing research and analysis and macro commentary online. And so don't even sign up for the paid newsletter, guys. Just sign up for the free newsletter. Let me know what you guys think. At the end of the day, I need to make money. So that's a whole other thing. But I just want people to sign up for the free newsletter because I think everyone is going to be better off for it. Check me out on Twitter as well. Yeah. But the newsletter is the place where everyone should find me. It's cubicanalytics.substack.com. I call it Cubic because I take that 3-pillar approach, analyzing macro, the stock market, and Bitcoin.
Yeah, man, absolutely. That is so awesome. And again, like I said, I've been a part of that free version for a while. It is phenomenal. In case you guys didn't know, Caleb, he eats, breathes, sleeps, poops, everything you can do as a human investing. So if you're looking for someone who is just absolutely on top of it, I'm not going to say that I've never met anyone who doesn't match him, but like Caleb is probably, if not the one of the hardest workers and hardest researchers and dedicated people in the crypto space. Make sure you're following on Twitter. Make sure you join that newsletter. Consider subscribing for updated versions so that he can continue. I mean, right now, I'm assuming, Caleb, you're doing this full time. You're just doing this investing and research stuff full time, correct?
For sure. So I started in October 2020, started the newsletter in May of 2021, and we're at almost 24,000 followers on Twitter and 3,100 free subscribers for the newsletter.
Come on. And so to be able to keep people like Caleb Franzen doing this full time, so he doesn't have to take another job, make sure if you are able and you would like to, go ahead and join that newsletter, pay for a subscription, just a small way to support him. Again, he was our first guest of the show. I look forward to having Caleb on again very soon. He's one of my favorite people in the entire crypto space. With that said, though, guys, that's all we have for you in this video. Make sure you stay tuned. If you have not already, subscribe to the channel, smash that like mittens button, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.